On Christmas Eve 2025, at Saratoga Substation in San Francisco, a cloud of black smoke rose into the sky from a small fire inside the substation. Residents reported hearing an explosion and between 16 and 21,000 people were without power, with much of it restored within 3 hours, with about 2,000 to 3,000 people still without power by 12:40 p.m. Residents were quoted with saying, "When you live near a substation like this, you get used to it," which is a crazy statement to me. We'll cover later. And a quick search on social media had the usual questions like, was it a deliberate act of terrorism? As well as accusations that the company responsible for maintaining the substation, Pacific Gas and Electric, known as PG&E, have been raising electricity prices and keeping the money meant for maintenance for shareholder profits, as well as calls for making the utility publicly owned. This comes days after another fire at their Mission substation, which I'll be covering very soon, as that has a colourful history of fires, as well as reports I can really dig into. So let's take a look at everything we know about the Saratoga fire, what I can infer from the very few images floating around, and learn a few things along the way. If you're new here, my name is Jordan, and I'm a transmission engineer in the UK, and I create these educational videos on infrastructure, power and history to teach people about our amazing power grids, and more. I also do my own incident analysis like this to cut through the crap, or PR speak that companies try to get away with because they know there's a lack of information and education in this space. So check out my previous videos on the Iberian blackout and the Heathrow substation fire up here. With that out of the way, let's dig in. So as this is a fresh event, there's no formal reports out yet on what actually happened from either the company or their regulator, which in this case is the CPUC, or California Public Utility Commission, which I blasted in a previous video on their handling of the California wildfires in 2025, very likely caused by Southern California Edison. So the information we have to go on is public statements given to the news outlets and any pictures or videos they got of the event. I live in freezing cold England, so I can't just fly my drone over to take some video, so I'm relying on this low resolution video I found online, which looks like it was taken from a helicopter, courtesy of NBC Bay Area. At around 11 seconds in, we get our first glimpse of the substation, which, from consulting open infrastructure maps and some research, is a 230 kV substation, which is transmission voltage, which is between Monte Vista and Visona 230 kV substations on that line. This line helps get bulk power in from Metcalfe 500 kV substation, which is slightly to the east, into the San Jose area more efficiently for it to be stepped down to a lower voltage and feed the residents and businesses here. So looking at this nice wide shot here at the start, we get to see the higher voltage stuff at the top of the screen because the gaps between the bus bars which carry the power are much larger, which is for the higher voltage because higher voltages can more easily bridge a gap by arcing. So we need to separate them. In comparison to the bottom of the screen, I can tell this is a much lower voltage because all of the bus bars are close together, and more on that in a second. So for an idea of the layout of the substation, we have the two overhead line circuits coming in at the top, one on the left and one on the right. Following both of these circuits down first, they come to these spiky looking things, which is known as a dead tank circuit breaker. For a quick recap, a circuit breaker is used to break a live electrical circuit under load, and especially under fault conditions, which could be many times the normal load current, and it needs to do it safely without rapidly disassembling, again and again reliably. This one is a dead tank because you can touch the metalwork and mechanisms at the bottom without getting the shock, because the high voltage bit is supported by these bushings, the spiky discs sticking out of the tank. A live tank, therefore, would have the whole thing supported up high, so you couldn't touch it, as it would be live and rapidly turn your liquids into a gas if you touched it. So not safe, and substations need to be safe by design because people like me need to work in them. Circuit breakers are essentially big switches that are engineered so that when we switch them under load and an arc forms between the contacts of said switch, we can extinguish the arc safely. So to do that, we need to separate the contacts really fast, like with a hydraulic or spring mechanism, and have something to extinguish or quench the arc that forms. So to do that, we need to separate the contacts really fast, like with a hydraulic or spring mechanism, and have something to extinguish or quench the arc that forms, like an insulating gas, such as SF6, or in this case oil, which fills the gap, blocks the arc and keeps everything cool, because these arcs are usually hotter than the surface of the sun. That's the basics of circuit breakers, and I'll be doing many in-depth videos on the different types and how they all work in future, so hit subscribe for that. Now back to the layout. As we come down, we get to this T-junction on the bus bars, where it goes up at an angle and over to the transformers here, which as mentioned is taking the high voltage 230 kV at the upper side, where the bushings are higher and spaced out, to the bottom side here, where they're much smaller and closer together, so we know this is the lower voltage side. Distribution voltages vary in the US, but this looks like 12 kV judging by how close these bars are, and in the UK we use 11 kV, which is the stuff up on wooden poles you see near homes, but this could also be 33 kV, but information on this site is sparse. Taking a step back to that T-junction on the bars again, we get two more circuit breakers here, which connect up our two circuits. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about that bit at the top, and we'll come back to that in a second. So now we can see there's two circuits coming into the substation feeding three transformers. And because of that circuit breaker placement, we can feed any transformer from either circuit by opening or closing different breakers. It looks like each transformer also has a disconnector, so you can disconnect individual transformers once the circuit has been broken. It also looks like on the low voltage side, each transformer feeds the same bus bars, so you can take any individual transformer out for maintenance or for a fault, and still feed the same load from the remaining transformers. But the image is quite a mess and it's hard to say for sure, but it's not really relevant to the story. And taking a look back at the top of the substation like I promised, we have this bus section of sorts that joins circuit 1 and 2 but doesn't have a circuit breaker. It only has this disconnector here which doesn't have the arc quenching abilities of a circuit breaker, and it moves much slower. So if you try to use this to break a live circuit, it will often turn into a puddle, which isn't great for long-term operations. But you can actually operate it live under one condition, that a parallel path exists for the load to flow down. So if all the other circuit breakers are closed, you can open this disconnector and it might spark a little bit, and it doesn't draw much of a meaningful arc with high energy. Once it's open, you can then open your circuit breakers again and operate the substation as two distinct circuits. Closing this disconnector again operates the whole substation solid. This lets you bypass your circuit breakers on each circuit if one fails or is out due to maintenance. But operating your substation solid like this has the risk of tripping the whole substation under a fault, which is why it'll normally be left open like it is now. So that does it for layouts. Hopefully you learned something new there, but now we need to get to the elephant in the room, or in this case, the big black scorch marks at the bottom of the image. So we covered just about everything on the layout apart from the bits that are relevant to the fire. At the very bottom of the substation here, you can see the bus bars end, and we have this Y shape with three branches going down the structure and into the ground. This is a cable sealing end, and this is where the three-phase bus bars terminate onto a cable, and the cable goes off into the city to power smaller substations, where power is stepped down further to feed homes and businesses. We can see there's a fair few of them fed from this substation, and for each cable circuit, you'll want a circuit breaker to be able to isolate that circuit if there's a fault on it, or just to turn it off for maintenance, for example. And these rectangular boxes you can see are these lower voltage circuit breakers. Now here's a question for the audience. Does metal burn? Certainly, if you have an arc that's hotter than the surface of the sun, anything will burn. But to leave these pitch black carbon deposits everywhere, you really need to be burning a hydrocarbon, like oil. This means this was an oil circuit breaker which catastrophically failed, spraying its oil everywhere, travelling down the bus bars and burning, until it burned itself out. Now it's also worth mentioning that when the fire brigade turned up, they opted not to fight the fire, and that's the right call to make. The amount of oil given off would have been pretty small, all things considered, and everything in there is stone, concrete and metal. It would have self-extinguished pretty fast. Now the substation should have been isolated when the fire started, but just for added safety, why bother fighting the fire if no life is at risk and no other assets are going to be affected? And that's how that call is made. This small oil fire likely didn't damage the bus bars, so they'll clean up nicely. Insulators might need to be replaced, as well as the cable sealing end, which will be damaged. And they probably have a bunch of these circuit breakers in stock, ready to replace the one that blew up, and the two adjacent had a warm oil bath. Now the golden question is, why did it fail? Circuit breakers, like transformers, can fail for most of the same reasons. A high enough energy fault will cause anything to blow up, which is why we have additional protection like surge arresters. Notably, I can't see any in the picture, but the quality is pretty poor. Lack of maintenance on the moving contacts and the mechanisms could also cause the contacts to become stuck while opening, prolonging an arc, boiling the oil until it bursts the breaker's tank like an egg. The contacts themselves need to be replaced every so often, as they regularly take a beating from the arcs and degrade away, and that gap between the contacts needs to be carefully maintained to work effectively. And the biggest concern with anything oil filled is maintaining the oil, making sure it's topped up and has the right amount to quench arcs and dissipate the heat, making sure the oil is regularly serviced to remove any contaminants like moisture and build-up of breakdown products like carbon, which accumulates every time an arc is drawn. The oil can self-heal to some degree and recombine, but if neglected, these products can build up, and if the breaker is damaged or letting moisture in, these contaminants reduce the insulating ability of the oil, making arcs more likely to be sustained rather than broken. And a sustained arc equals assets turning into smoke. So those are a few of the ways a circuit breaker can fail. Like transformers, they also have bushings which, if oil filled, can also fail, but at these lower voltage it's unlikely to be oil filled. You can check out the video up here on why transformers fail, which I produced in response to my video on North Hyde being taken down, so you can be more informed the next time someone tells you it was foul play. As you can see, the majority of these things come down to lack of maintenance, with some coming down to design or pure chance. But until the full report comes out, we won't know for sure. Speaking of reports, the Mission substation fire that happened just days prior has a history of catching fire going back 22 years and more. But being an indoor substation, there's no photos to discuss. So I'll break that one down soon so we know what to look out for when the next report for the 2025 fire is released, and see if PG&E took their own info after the second fire on how to prevent a fire happening again there. Spoiler alert, they didn't take the info the second time round, so we'll see. If you liked this video, always remember to hit that like button and subscribe, and leave a comment if there's any other videos you'd like me to make, any incidents to analyse, or anything you want to learn more about. And if you want to support me more, my Patreon is linked in the description. Thanks and take care. If you're interested in more industrial history and technical content, like, subscribe, and let me know down below what else you want me to cover. If you want to support me directly and have a bigger say in what videos I work on next, check out my Patreon link in the description, and thanks to my patrons Benedict, Mark, Mr. Bear, Andy, Herring, Andrew, Jack, Lionel, Richard, TJ, Colin, Jay Hamilton, Nils, Tim Small, John Walker, Joe Newman, Gavin, White Quark. Let's pay the cat tax. I'm gonna have to change this battery. Of course the batteries are in the house. Fucking teleprompter. Oh, it's actually dead. Can't stop the fucking roll. What a ruined shot. Oh, Neely's got any charge now. That'll do. 2 triple A's. Coming right up. Which is slightly east. Into the San Jose. Oh, I'm tired.